Okay, so now we're going to turn our attention back to the south again. We had a long reign in the days of Uzziah. Uzziah reigned for 52 years. But he saw all these other kings of Israel come and go. You know, he was there. Oh man, he saw all these most recent ones. Way back in chapter 14, you know, Amaziah began to reign, Uzziah, in Judah, when Jehoash was still king. So Amaziah saw Jehoash, he saw Jeroboam II come and go, and he saw all these other kings, Zechariah, Shallum, Menahem, Pekahiah, and Pekah. All of them came and went during the time while Uzziah was still king of Israel. Now he's been relegated to being the house by himself, so he's not the acting day-to-day monarch any longer, but he's still the senior monarch, and we're still dating things according to his reign, at least up to now. In the second year of peace, so this is now his son, it's time for him to die. His last year, it's his 52nd year, and that's the year that Pekah becomes king in Israel. At least the year he eliminates Pekahiah. Pekah may have been reigning as a sort of rogue king across the river. I don't really know. But at least in the 52nd year of Uzziah, Pekah becomes king of all of Israel, at least. That's also the year that Isaiah's ministry as a prophet started. When we get to the book of Isaiah, we're going to read that he got his call to become a prophet of God in the year that King Uzziah died. So that's a significant year. And that was the year 740 BC, by the way. So now, we're going down in chapters 2 Kings 15, starting in verse 32. In the second year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Judah, Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, began to reign. Now, he'd already been king, acting king, for some time. Okay, he had had a co-regency going on with Uzziah for at least 10 years at this point. He was 25 years old when he became king. And he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. Now we know there's a problem with this, because we just read a couple of verses ago that Hoshea assassinates Pekah and succeeds him as king in the north in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah. So he obviously has a 20-year reign, but down here, in this verse, it says he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. So again, that speaks of a co-regency issue. He had a 10 or 12-year co-regency with his father, and even a brief co-regency with his son. When I upload these videos 8 months from now, or whenever I finally get around to it, I'm still uploading ones from Joshua in my actual I record the videos and then I upload the videos, and the uploading takes longer than the recording. So I'm way ahead on the recording than I am on the uploading. Whenever I do get around to uploading these videos, I'm going to type out in my text description of the videos, which accompanies the video on the YouTube page, I'm going to type out the charts of these kings and their reigns, because there is a lot of overlap. There is a lot of time when the father and the son are on the throne together, and that the Bible writers just do not see fit to tell us this explicitly. They just don't. Okay, we read about it with Hoshea and or Pekah, and Hoshea, and here we read it again with Jotham. There's information they just simply do not include. Okay, they're not telling us how they're reckoning these years. They assume we know. Remember, these Bible writers, these Hebrew writers, these scribes, these historians are writing to people that know this stuff. Okay, when they are putting these things down in their final form and the exile, or when at 600 BC, or whenever they did it, they're assuming that their readers, the people who are going to be reading it out loud to the people, remember, they're mostly going to be hearing it. A few people are going to be reading it out loud to the rest. And they are assuming that these people know this stuff. They're not including all this information because they assume that their audience knows it. Well, of course, we don't know it. And in fact, This knowledge would be lost pretty soon after this text was written. When they wrote a Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament in the 200s or so BC, we call it the Septuagint. It was Greek had become, Alexander the Great came along in the 330s, conquered the world, spread Grecian influence everywhere. So the Greek then became the main language, okay? And Hebrew was in the decline. And so in the 200s or so BC, they wrote a Greek version of the Old Testament based on their Hebrew scripts, their Hebrew copies. And at that point in time, and that was only about 4 or so hundred years later, they had already forgotten how these kings, writers dated this stuff. Okay, the information that's necessary to fill in the blanks was already forgotten by that point. So this, they, even in the 200s BC, they already didn't know because these kings writers, when they give these dates, they're leaving out information. Okay, they're not explaining to us how they're arriving at these dates, or what system of succession they use, whether there's a co-regency they're including or not. They just don't mention that. They don't include that. My guess is that they thought that people who would read this and hear this out loud just knew that. They didn't need to mention that. But that knowledge was lost pretty soon after these texts were first written. So it's been a mystery for a long time. Now, in the 20th century AD, to a large degree, this mystery was solved. But this was a problem for a very long time. 2,200 years or so, we didn't understand what these kings writers are talking about when they said some of this stuff. And the reason why is simply because there's information they're leaving out. There's stuff that they know that they're using to arrive to these dates and these years, and they're just not including the information in the text. Anyway, so Jotham was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother's name was Jerusha, daughter of Zadok. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Uzziah had done. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord. As for the other events of Jotham's reign and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? In those days, and we're going to read about this more specifically a little bit later, the Lord began to send Rezin, king of Aram. Remember that king in Syria? We call it Syria today, north of Israel. So he began to send the king of Aram and Pekah, son of Remaliah, against Judah. We'll read about that more a little bit. Jotham rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of David, the city of his father. And Ahaz, his son, succeeded him as king. Okay, now we're going to flip back to 2 Chronicles and read more about Jotham. This is 2 Chronicles 27, a fairly short chapter. Jotham was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother's name was Jerusha, daughter of Zadok. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Uzziah had done. But unlike him, he did not enter the temple of the Lord. So he learned from his father's mistake. The people, however, continued their corrupt practices. Jotham could not cleanse the people. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord and did extensive work on the wall at the hill of Ophel. He built towns in the Judean hills and forts and towers in the wooded areas. Jotham made war on the king of the Ammonites. Remember them? They're still around. They're east of Israel, east of Judah, and conquered them. Now, they're not the big enemies anymore. The big enemies are going to be the Assyrians here, but they're still around. These Ammonites are still around. That year, the Ammonites paid him 100 talents of silver, 10,000 cores of wheat, and 10,000 cores of barley. The Ammonites brought him the same amount also in the second and third years. Jotham grew powerful because he walked steadfastly before the Lord his God. The other events in Jotham's reign, including all his wars and the other things he did, are written in the books of the kings of Israel and Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. Jotham rested with his fathers, and was buried in the city of David. And Ahaz, his son, succeeded him as king. Okay, we have a lot to say about Ahaz. So we're going to make him, that's not what I wanted. We're going to make him the star of his own video here in a minute. Ahaz is a classic example of a bad example. What not to do. He's going to be the worst king of Judah up to this point in time. So and during this reading of Ahaz, we're going to take a detour into Isaiah and read a little bit about that. So we'll do that in just a second here.